I'm Fast Lawyer. Today we're going to review Mixture VR, a game that was released on the Steam store April 12th, 2024 by developer Played With Fire. It normally retails for $20. I bought this game, I tested it out on the Meta Quest 3 using link cable on my RTX 3080. Mixture was originally released February 2023 on the Meta store, so it is a Quest port, but it is enhanced for PC VR, including better graphics, higher resolution, dynamic lighting, new and additional VFX, as well as more environmental elements. Mixture is a fantasy action adventure Metroidvania where you use both first person and third person to control a knight and an alchemist. It's sort of like Moss, but it is more focused on the platforming and the combat. Moss is more like a narrative driven, and the action is more accessible for a wide mass audience, where this is a more hardcore action platformer, although there are different difficulty levels, but it's still challenging. I played Mixture on normal difficulty with aim assist off, and I played a total of 11.7 hours, but I did not 100% the game. I would estimate it would take most people 8 to 10 hours to beat the game. Mixture currently has 0 reviews on the Steam store, and that's a shame because this is the best PC VR game that I have played so far in 2024. However, I will say this game is definitely not for everyone. It is hardcore. It has some very intense boss fights, and it's very different than Moss. I almost hate comparing the games because they are very different. They're for different audiences. Mixture VR is running on the Unity engine. On my RTX 3080, I was getting mostly 72 frames per second, the Quest 3 default on PC. And the only time I noticed any kind of like micro stutters or lag is when new scenes were loading in. Now the bad news is that there are no graphical settings whatsoever, but the good news is that even though this game has very simple graphics, and in certain areas I did think the game was too dark, for the most part this game is pleasant to look at in VR, and I think a lot of that has to do with just with the art style, how inventive developers were in creating these worlds. It has 4 unique biomes and over 30 levels, and I enjoyed my time in these worlds. There are different settings available, including smooth or snap turning, left-handed or right-handed. There's different difficulty levels as well as aim assist on or off. You can play this game comfortably seated or standing. Now the sound mix was just okay for me, but this game does have a very good musical score, but I really would have loved if instead of all this text reading for getting the story, if it had included audio narration for the characters. Now surprisingly, there is actually a very good story here if you take the time to read and try to do all the little inscriptions so you can get a little bit more background on the story. In fact, the story was so good that I went out of my way to try to find all these inscriptions. Now, I don't want to do any spoilers, but I will mention that you do control the alchemist Sephiros and the Moss Knight Sola. And unlike Moss, where you're clearly friends, this has a little bit more intrigue to it. And while I did love the story, sometimes it felt that the 2 different characters you're controlling just weren't as close as probably they should have been to make this more impactful on the player. When 2 people are close to each other, you're obviously going to have higher stakes in the outcome of the game. Here, you're not really that close, so you never feel the high stakes, and what's more, you don't even really pick up the Moss as the alchemist until you're about halfway through the game. So me as the gamer, I just never really felt that close of connection to either the Moss or the alchemist. But besides that, the story is really good and I really enjoyed it. As far as the gameplay, it seems pretty simple at first. You have some very basic hack and slash, 1 button for strike, another button for dash, for the little Moss Knight Sola. However, as the alchemist, you're also throwing potions, and you might move some magical levers to open up passageways, and you're also collecting ingredients so that you can make more potions on the fly. And this all sounds very simple, but in the execution is where this becomes very complex, very challenging and can become a hardcore challenge. Not just in the combat, but also in the platforming where you have to time certain jumps. And I know some of you are asking, well, what do you mean jumps? You have a dash and you have an attack. Where's the jump? Well, you don't actually jump, but there are certain locations where you can throw a potion to make the character jump up. And once you're in the air, you can glide, and there's even a dive attack to get down. And there's also puzzles in these platforming sections that you have to figure out how to get around these obstacles. And there's a lot of variety in the different enemies. They have different weaknesses, and the potions react differently to them. On top of that, the boss fights just bring all your knowledge together. I found all the boss fights to be difficult. I died multiple times before figuring out the optimal strategy to defeat them. These were some of the most fun boss fights that I've ever faced in VR. And I would say this game is almost like trying to spin plates, where you're trying to do several different things at the same time. You're trying to keep an eye on enemies. At the same time, you're trying to collect resources. And at the same time, you're trying to aim and throw these potions at the enemies and figure out what's the best one to use. Behind the very seemingly simple gameplay, there's actually a lot of depth and a lot of strategy involved in these fights. And a lot of that just has to do with a very smart enemy design, along with the very carefully crafted environments full of danger. But unfortunately, there are some negatives to mention. While I did not face any game-breaking bugs, I did face several bugs, some of them which required me to reload the prior checkpoint. At one point, I got stuck while I was climbing a wall and I couldn't move my character any longer. In another moment, enemies kept respawning, and it was just one enemy. There was no other enemies, and there was just no way I could get out of that blocked off area. And on top of that, sometimes the checkpoints just weren't very generous, and you had to do a very long section again. And sometimes it's just very difficult to tell where you're supposed to go next unless you pay very close attention to all the conversations going on with the text reading. Finally, I do have an issue with the camera. At times, you just couldn't get a good view of the action, and that can cause problems as far as being able to tell when your swings hit, how much damage you're causing if you're about to get hit, or how to get around an obstacle. But despite all those negatives, this is the most fun PC VR game on the Steam store that I have played in 2024 so far. It's got good combat, it's got good platforming, it's got a good mix of both. Getting to the boss fights is fun, and the boss fights are absolutely some of the best that I have ever played in VR. Each of the boss fights was different, with different challenges, with different ideas and what you need to do, and they were all very interesting and memorable. So yeah, I highly recommend this game. If I have to rate it, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Which is a great score for me. As you know, I usually give pretty low scores. There's a lot of 4, 5, and 6s that I give scores at. Anyways, I do find it kind of sad that this game currently has 0 reviews. I'm going to be the first review. But yeah, it's the best PC VR game I played so far in 2024. So I hope that some of you show this game some love and go out and buy it. Anyways, I'm Fast Lawyer. This has been my review for Mixture VR. If you found it useful, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the video.